Now, to unpack the AFCON tournament, South Africa's chances and other contenders, we're now joined by SABC sports commentator and News 24 sports reporter Khanyiso Tshwaku. Very good afternoon to you, Khanyiso, and thank you very much for joining us on SA Today. I want to start with AFCON just in general. We've been looking forward to the tournament for a year. What can we expect from this edition of the tournament, especially considering it's taking place in the Moroccan winter and the squads on paper, for instance?
Well, firstly, good afternoon, Mawande, good afternoon to the viewers. I think the most important part is one, the Moroccan winter, which will probably mean that teams won't be as drained from a weather perspective. I mean, remember, there's always been a bit of conjecture regarding when AFCON should be held. Should be held in July, August, when especially north of the equator, it's at its warmest and probably not at its least conducive for quality football. So I think also it's quite a mid-season tournament that's starting today and then ending on the 18th. So I mean, we've already seen how unhappy are the European teams with the departure of their key African players. But look, I mean, as the report rightly said, Morocco are probably under the biggest pressure of any host so far. I mean, it's 49 years since they last won this tournament. I mean, they've put every building block in place from an age group perspective. They've been very good in age group football. I mean, look at the improvement in women's football at the moment. So it becomes very important for the host to put their best foot forward. Especially remembering the fact that they were favourites in the previous tournament in the Cote d'Ivoire, as South Africa eliminated them in the round of 16. So I think for the hosts, it becomes very important that they put their best foot forward, not just in the group stages, but throughout the tournament.
Now, speaking of Morocco, plenty of teams go into AFCON highly rated, and more often than not, things don't go according to plan. What makes AFCON so unpredictable, and why can't we always rely on form going into the tournament, like in the case of Morocco, for instance?
Look, AFCON, of the Confederation tournaments, AFCON is comfortably the most passionate, the most unpredictable. With the fact that teams always go in with a point to prove. I mean, we look at our own national team, Bafana, for example. They were unfancy leading into the previous tournament. And look, they surprised all and sundry by getting into the semi-finals. Now that the weight of expectation is on them, it's going to take quite an effort. I mean, look, they've got the opening game against Angola tomorrow evening in Marrakesh, which will probably set the stage for their tournament. Remember that they actually lost the opening game in Cote d'Ivoire against Mali, but they were actually able to advance through to the semifinals. So it's just a case that teams tend to, especially the smaller teams, want to put their best foot forward because some of them know that getting to the World Cup is sometimes a bit beyond them. But the African Cup of Nations is a stage where they should be able to put their front foot forward and actually just showcase what they're all about as teams and from a fighting spirit perspective.
Touching on the smaller teams, we've seen quite a few over the past few years causing stunning upsets. We had Cape Verde last time around, giving Bafana a run for their money and going into a penalty shootout. We've seen the Comores in the past as well. Which are some of the smaller nations to look out for this time around?
It's probably interesting to see how Comores will fare. I think what international football has also done is to just narrow the gap between the big team and the small teams. I think what AFCON does just shows up how these teams, because they watch other teams prepare quite more frequently, they're able to get a bit more information on the bigger rivals. I mean, if you look at our own group, we've got Zimbabwe at some point in the tournament. And remember how Zimbabwe actually gave South Africa quite a fright in the World Cup qualifiers. That's going to be quite interesting. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the end of that's our final group stage game. And if you look at what happened with the World Cup stage, I think the last thing South Africa would want is to actually underestimate Zimbabwe. I mean, Egypt is probably the biggest group stage game that we'll be playing, but also we have to look at an Angola side that has been competitive at the AFCON level. So I think with the small teams, for example, they'll be the ones sitting back and realizing that it's the big teams who need to come to them and do the business of actually having to win, whereas for them, it's just going out there playing as best as they can.
And of those big teams, I mean, we have Egypt and Nigeria who haven't won the tournament for quite a while. We've got South Africa and the like. Who are the teams that have the most to prove going into this tournament?
Indeed, Nigeria. I mean, Nigeria will probably be hurting by the fact that they didn't make the World Cup. So probably this is their last opportunity to show that they are probably one of the bigger teams going around. I mean, look, if you look at the last time they won AFCON, that was back in 2013. They've had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, even if you look at a team like Egypt, yes, they've been to a final before, but they've also got a bigger point to prove. I mean, remember that when they were hosts, Bafana eliminated them in the round of 16. That was back in 2019. South Africa also have a point to prove, but I think all eyes will be on Morocco. They're the hosts of the tournament. They've put so much money into their football development. They need to have a return on their investment, and there's no better opportunity for them to return. And I think they'll be encouraged by how Cote d'Ivoire played as hosts in the previous edition. And I think them being a much better side probably will want to feed off that energy, one, of being the better side, and two, at least being carried by the fans to the tournament, but they'll also come with added pressure.
I want to touch on Bafana Bafana. You spoke of them having a weight of expectation this time around as well. At the last tournament, they flew under the radar, probably did a lot better than a lot of us expected, maybe, perhaps, but they don't have that luxury this time around. What does Bafana Bafana need to do to make sure that they go very far in this tournament?
Look, I think the first two group games will give us a fair indication of where they will be. I mean, look, a win against Angola will probably set them up. And I think the key thing against Egypt, it will determine who finishes where in the group. And you realize that always when you finish top of the group, you tend to get the easier way out to the quarterfinal, to the round of 16. Even though South Africa will be the first ones to admit that when they finished second in their group, they got Morocco. They eliminated Morocco. They still had a very, very good Cape Verde side that they needed to meet. And they got past that through penalties, only to meet Nigeria in the semifinals. So already there isn't an easy way out of any tournament. And I realize that with South Africa in particular, 3 from 3 will probably be very good for them. But also it will raise the expectations significantly. So I won't be surprised if South Africa get out of this group with 2 wins from 3 games. And I suspect that drawing against Egypt will probably be a very good result for them.
Is this going to be Bafana Bafana's biggest moment? I know we had World Cup qualification a little bit earlier this year, and that was a significant moment in the country's footballing history. But this particular tournament, will it be a little more significant than that?
It will. I mean, should they win, it will be marked to be right on 30 years since we won the AFCON back in 1996. So it will be very significant. But you can imagine what it will mean for South African football supporters and the national team if they go to the World Cup as reigning AFCON champions. That will be a huge fillip for them. So I think it's very important that they look after every group game in the tournament, and then moving from every group game in the tournament, ensuring that the next stage is that they worry about the game that comes up, because if they look too far ahead of themselves and see themselves going to the World Cup as AFCON champions, instead of doing the business by winning each game and ensuring that they look after the basics, they may find themselves in trouble.
And just lastly, before I let you go, Khanyiso, we've seen the Comores pull off a big upset at AFCON before. Is that possible tonight?
Anything goes in AFCON. And I think with the pressure that Morocco are under to perform, probably they may be shackled by the fact that it's going to be, it's a big game for both sides, but the Comores in particular will look back and realize that they've got the least to lose, because if they come out of the game with a point, it's a win for them and 2 points lost for Morocco. So I think for Morocco, they are under significant pressure to ensure that they come out of this game with a positive result.